Hello everyone, my name is Jordan, also known as X-3. Today I want to show you guys something different for Tropical Wednesday. I thought with tropical in the name for today, I thought we'd do a fairy-like synth. So I've kind of created something like that inside of Collision. So I'm going to show you this demo example of showing it off and how powerful it is. And then I'm going to guide you into making this synth. So stay tuned. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is throw in a blank instance of Collision into your new MIDI track. Collision is a very different type of analog instrument, and the reason why I call it an instrument rather than a synth is because rather than using oscillators, we use different types of pipe and percussion strings to kind of give our sound a starting point to kind of work with. We also work with different bodies to give it a bigger sound or a smaller harmonic sound. So what I'm going to do now is go on over to my mallet. The mallet section actually controls a lot of the different velocity and color of the sound to begin with. So what I did with my mallet is I just turned up the key to 26%. I gave it this amount of velocity so that way when we start to softly hit the notes, it will play at 26%. And when we really start to hit the notes, it will play at 0. So it's going to give it a little bit of different rhythmic to it. Other than that, I turn on my noise. The noise gives it a lot of depth and give it a lot more body than the actual sounds themselves. So for the noise, I set this to a high pass instead of a low pass, and I set the frequency to about 382 Hz. And I set the Q about 1.19. The Q is very important. The Q kind of gives it a little bit of a little EQ right here in the midsection of 382 Hz. Giving it a little bit more noise to work with. But for our envelope, in order to really shape the sound and how it behaves with the LFO a little bit later on, we're going to change this K value from 0 to 100%. For the envelope settings, I'm going to go on in and change this to 5 milliseconds. I'm going to change my A all the way down to 2 milliseconds, and the same for my release. So now that we have this all filled out, I'm going to hop on over to my resonator. For the resonator, we actually do not work with a beam, we work with a tube type. I'm going to set the decay from this tube type to be much shorter. So I'm going to set this to a small percentage of 429 milliseconds. Now, when you type that value, it won't give you that same thing, so you actually have to do it manually. There we go. And the radius is perfectly fine where it is. But I want to give my characteristic of my sound a little bit more body. So I want to turn on my second resonator. And before I go anywhere, I'm going to take my volume all the way up to negative 3.5 decibels instead of negative 6. Hop on over to your resonator too. Now if you see this little keychain in the middle, you don't need to worry about any of that. Since it links 2 of these different resonating types, these different presets to work with, it will give you a third option to work in between that. But we're not going to use that, so go on over to resonator 2. For resonator 2, we're going to set this to a string type. Now instead of medium, I'm going to set this to few. Watch how that affects the sound. it kind of gave it a more muffled sound. The reason for this is that we're using less instances of the string. So we're kind of working with less than more, which is pretty good for our CPU. Other than that, I'm going to change my decay from 132 to a little bit above this to 1.54. And leave the material at 0. For the left listening and the right listening, we're going to change these. What this does is it gives it a little bit of diffusing in between your speakers, so that way if you really start to get into the ratio and the enharmonics, these start to play bigger effects. But for now, we're going to kind of use it as a diffusing tool. For the left listening, I changed this to 25%. And for the right listening, I changed this to 18% instead of 90%. So now we have more harmonic in between the first tube and the second one. I want to change my hit from 50 to 35%. So we can have less harmonics hitting in between the middle rather than hitting in the higher ranges. The last few things that I did for this percussion type of instrument is I turned up my brightness all the way. To kind of sing it more, I turned on my retrig, so that way when the LFO comes into play, it's going to restart that LFO over and over and over again. The other two things I did is I turned up my bleed from 0 to 40%. This allows each of the instances of the tube and the string to bleed past its current volume. Kind of like limiting. What a compressor does to a kick is it forces all the sound to squish, and that's what kind of this does, except it allows some of the air to kind of flow through the physical model, so that way you can start to hear like a little type of noise. Like you start to hear like it giving more. For the final things that I do is turn on your LFO, turn on LFO 1, and set this to a sync with this little note looking thing. And I turn up my depth to 88. And I turn up the rate to 1/12. 1/12 is more of a triplet. So I'm going to turn that up a little bit more. The destination, this is going to be interesting. I turn it to volume, and I set the amount for the volume to 88% as well. Now have a listen to how this sounds. If this depth is too much, just take it back down to 50. There you guys have it, your very own Legend of Zelda type of fairy sound. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for a Triple Threat Thursday of some very new type of growls, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, hit a like for some new content. And of course, have a good one and be safe. Peace. Hello everyone, my name is Jordan, also known as X-3. I wanted to say thank you guys so much for following me, and as always, I hope you guys have a good one. Make sure to always break a sweat, so that way you know you're working hard. Anyways, yeah, I hope you guys have a swell day, a good one, and peace. Peace. Have a good one, guys. Peace.